Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello and greetings to all of our wonderful viewers out there. Thank you for tuning in to IT Pro TV. We're glad you're joining us today. I'm Wes Bryan, and we got a great show in store for you today. We're going to be looking at more customer skills for techies. And joining us back in the studios is the customer service expert herself, Mrs. Jo Peacock. Jo, how are you doing today?
I'm absolutely great. Thank you, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to it. You know, in the first couple of parts, we were talking about some of the very basics when it comes to communication skills. Now, are we going to advance a little bit here?
Well,
We're going to kind of work up the chain?
Actually, no. We weren't talking about skills at all.
No skills.
We haven't spoken about skills.
It was the basics. That's right.
No, we were speaking about principles.
Principles.
Right. So in our last episode, well, the last few episodes,
Yeah.
we've been talking about principles of communication. So we're talking about sort of, you know, the principles, the practices that we need to apply to communication. But we haven't actually talked about the skills that you need to be a service desk analyst, you know. And I don't mean technical skills. I know we're going to talk about those a little bit later in you know, some of our episodes a little bit later in this series. But right now, I'm talking about the interpersonal skills that we need to be a customer service analyst or a service desk analyst or technical support analyst, because interpersonal skills are really important. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think before you answer.
Sure.
And I want you to think as well, because I want you to come up with an answer yourself. It's a simple yes or no answer. But I've been talking about interpersonal skills so far, all right? So I've mentioned the word interpersonal, and interpersonal, what does that mean? This isn't the question, by the way, but what does interpersonal mean for you?
I think it's more of one-on-one. Interpersonal is, you know, we're not talking, you know, one person outward to many people or talking to just a specific few people, but we're talking like a one-on-one conversation.
Well, we can be talking to many people.
You could still be
yeah,
talking
I mean,
to many people.
interpersonal skills are basically about your relationships.
Okay, sure.
Okay, and it can be a one-on-one relationship, but you still need interpersonal skills to be able to talk to a group of 500 people.
That does make sense, yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to be asleep.
That's sure.
Yeah,
sure,
and we've
sure.
all been there before, right?
Yeah, yes, I have. I've been one of those people sleeping.
But do you think, so this is the question that I want you to think about.
Okay.
Do you think that interpersonal skills can be learnt?
Yes, I do. Yes, I
Okay.
believe they can. I'm sure there are certain things that if you don't have them, maybe can't be learned. But I do believe that they can be cultivated and developed. And the reason I say that is because I've changed careers a handful of times over my lifetime. And I know that the interpersonal skills that we have on a construction site are far different than the interpersonal skills that we have, let's say, when I was a restaurant manager and had to oversee a team that was providing customer service face-to-face.
But are those skills different because we just had to apply the same skills but in a different way to a different group of people?
Well, that's a good, yeah, it could be exactly the same skills. And it might be, you know, what you've talked about and discussed with us in the first few episodes of understanding who the audience is. So I understood that the construction audience was different than the people that I was talking to, let's say on the front lines of a restaurant. But it does make sense that maybe those skills are the same, that they're just tailored slightly different depending on the person.
Right. So, you see, the communication principles can be applied by absolutely anybody, and communication principles can be learned. Yes, we apply those communication principles, so we have to learn what to do with them. And in fact, that's what we did over the last few episodes. We looked at those communication principles and we said, well, how can I apply these? How can I apply the fact that communication is a two-way process, for instance? How can I make sure that I elicit feedback, but I elicit that in the correct way? That I'm not asking a closed question, that I'm asking an open question, and that the question is actually relevant. So those communication principles can be learned. And the reason why I ask about skills is because if we were to look at agile project management, for instance, there is something called a growth mindset. And a growth mindset within agile believes that we can learn skills. And yes, we can learn skills. However, the jury is still out on whether interpersonal skills can be learnt if they can. And so this is just really a debate, but it's something that I want you to think about, because you see, interpersonal skills involve things like how we interact. It's all about your personality. It's about, and this is why I say it's just as important if you're addressing a group of 500 people as if you're addressing just one person. So, for instance, I know that maybe sometimes, then I can, I know,
Here it comes.
I know, yeah, here it comes. I know that maybe sometimes I can be very direct.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's it. That's all
as
he's going to
direct
say
as
to
you
that,
get.
right?
It's a direct
yeah.
answer too.
But I know that I can be very direct. So I know that in certain situations, then I have to ensure that, especially if it's people that I haven't met for the first time, and culturally we are different in that respect as well, because us Europeans tend to be a little bit more direct than you do. And so I know that culturally, depending on where I am, I may have to change the way that I react to certain things or the way that I answer certain things. But it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change my personality.
And you've said this before, because we've talked about, cultural diversities too. And one of the things that you've mentioned, since you've, I've had the pleasure of working with you here, is the fact that some cultures don't participate in small talk. They don't like small talk, where maybe some cultures do. So I can only imagine that cultural difference and not really a divide is something that the communicator has to keep in mind, that maybe you don't want small talk. And like you say, sometimes you're very direct, but I think you get to the point and there's not a lot of padding around it, right? Where in some cultures, we've got to kind of, we say butter people up. We've got to pad it, if you will, right? With some of that small talk and banter. Some people just want you to get straight to the point. So I really think it goes back to listening to your audience like you presented originally.
Yes, and I'm not one that wants to participate in banter necessarily.
Sure.
But we have to respect cultural differences. One of my favourite movies, actually, is it's an English movie, but it's and it's probably one that everybody's seen, which is, I don't know whether you might have seen it, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel.
No, but now I'm going to put it on my
right, and the reason
list.
why, it's all about a group of pensioners, basically, that moved to India. But the reason why it's one of my favourite movies, and this is, and I am going to admit this, is because there is one particular scene or a couple of scenes where there are some characters that are based in a call centre in India. And I know that I have done quite a lot of consultancy work with call centres in India. And we have this character played by Dame Judi Dench, actually, who goes into the call centre and who, as a sort of retiree, is teaching these people in a call centre how to speak to English people. Saying things like, you talking about buttering them up, but starting a conversation with things like, oh, hi, how are you? Are you having a good day? What's on TV at the moment? Oh, that's a great program. Oh, how's the weather? That sort of thing. And so just teaching people how to communicate at that level. So to a certain degree, some of those skills can be learned. We're not expecting you to change your personality, but in order to provide good customer service and in order to be able to translate, because that's what our technical support teams do, then you need to understand what language you're translating into. So you have to be able to relate to your audience. Now, I'll always say to people, and I say this quite often as well, you can put somebody on a dealing with difficult people course, but it doesn't necessarily make them a patient person. No, it won't make them a patient person, but it will teach them how to handle certain types of situations. You can put somebody on a time management course, but it doesn't necessarily make them a punctual person. No, but again, you can teach them the relevance of punctuality and the importance of it.
Is this trial or / experience, or I said trial and education by experience, through experience, actually going through that process helps to teach them that.
Right. And so, I mean, from my perspective, I've been doing this for way too many years, but I understand that a lot of organizations struggle with this. And you see, my background is very, very technical, but obviously I've moved more into sort of a governance framework management type role. And that's where that's where I will put myself right now. And in order to be able to advise on things like customer service skills for service desks, I've had to have sat in both of those camps. I have had to have sat in the technical realm and understood the technical difficulties that arise. The difficulties that arise when you're a service desk analyst and that you can deal with something in 2 seconds. However, you don't want to spend 5 minutes on the phone with somebody when, look, if you just leave me and let's just have some silence for a couple of seconds, then I can actually solve this for you. However, that's not good customer service, and so we need you to multitask in that instance. And so we do have to be in both camps in order to be able to deliver, excellent customer service. And that's one of the reasons why, I always say that the customer service, technical service, support desk, service desk, help desk, whatever you want to call them, that role is severely underrated because, it's the window to IT for most organizations. It's the first glimpse of IT that most people in an organization see.
And it's very, very important too, because again, coming from the restaurant industry, I work with different field consultants, and I wasn't the consultant, I was the consultee, if you will, because they want us always to be better and always think about customer service. One of the interesting facts that I learned is I said this in other episodes, like when you go to a drive-through, within 10 seconds if you're ever coming back, within 30 seconds of a customer walking through the door, they can tell if they're ever going to come back to your company again based on the first impression that they get and the appearances that they get and the service that they get. And if they don't get that right away or have a perceived, value to that they are going to get that, then they're not coming back to your company at all.
Right. One of the best restaurant experiences that I ever had, and this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but one of the best restaurant experiences that I ever had was actually the worst meal that I ever had. And that was because from the minute I walked into that place, they were so busy, and I mean, it was just so long. But you know what? At the end of it, everybody was so polite. The manager was so polite, and the manager actually ripped that bill up right in front of my face and said, "We can't expect you to pay for this. Despite the fact that you've eaten, you've also spent 2.5 hours in this restaurant, and you really didn't need to spend 2.5 hours. And so, yes, you've had your food, but we want to give you it free of charge."
Would you say that in that instance, they gained a customer for life, even though the experience wasn't bad, or they gained enough confidence that at least they made it right and you're still not going back?
Well, I wouldn't say a customer for life because that was in Cambridge in the UK. And
sure. Well,
I'm over here in Florida now. But yes, I have been back to that restaurant since.
Absolutely, and I've done that before too, where somebody has gone out of their way to make sure that I got the best experience possible, even though it wasn't going right to start, and I've definitely come back. Why? Because they put 110% effort to fix the problem, make it right, make sure that I was satisfied, and that extra effort's what said, you're human. Maybe you're just having a bad day, but I can come back based on how you treated me when things went wrong.
Yes, yeah. So let's take a look at some of the skills then that we have or that we expect from our customer service analysts then. And the first one that I want to talk about is empathy. There is a huge difference between empathy and sympathy, and I've tried to explain it on this slide here. Empathy is the ability to understand, whereas sympathy is the pity that you feel. Do you know the difference? It can be a little bit of a tricky one, actually, this one.
I'm going to try it. I don't know. Empathy is usually you can relate based on experience. You kind of understand what the customer's going on because you've experienced that before. And sympathy, maybe you don't know exactly what the customer's, going through, but you kind of feel sorry because you know they might be having a bad experience. Maybe.
Right. Okay. So, have you ever been involved in a car accident?
You're going to jinx me on this one. But I'm going to say once,
right?
Almost 38 years ago.
Do you know what the golden rule is for car accidents?
Don't get in them.
Don't get in them. Yeah, I like that one.
But no, I don't.
The golden rule for car accidents is never say sorry. And you know why? Because when you say sorry, you admit guilt.
Oh, interesting.
So I have, and this is, again, come from kind of years of experience, I have a very, very, I guess, a very polarized view over the word sorry.
Sure, because it does imply sorrow, and a lot of times when people just freely throw it out there, they have no sorrow in their heart. They're just using the word.
Right. Now, I always say to people, don't say sorry, because if you were really sorry, you would never have done it in the first place. Right? But anyway, that goes back to my directness again.
Yeah, definitely.
But nevertheless, there is a difference between empathy and sympathy. When I call a service desk, I do not want your sympathy. I don't want you to be sorry. And in fact, from a customer perspective, let's be blunt about this. I don't care whether you're sorry or not. What I actually want is you to understand the importance, the significance of the issue, and what I want you to do is to fix whatever issue it is that I have. I don't need you to apologize. I don't need you to profusely, say sorry 100 times in that conversation. Even if I'm not happy, I don't care whether you're sorry or not. What I actually want is just for you to understand and to understand my perspective and to understand my point of view. So the word sorry, I think, is always overly used anyway.
Yes, it is.
But this is something that is very, and again, we could be talking cultural differences here. Well, we are talking some cultural differences, but it's one of the sort of the standards of advice that we always give to customer service analysts is that you don't need to say sorry. What you need to do is to empathize, and that means that you need to understand. You need to understand, again, the language of the customer. You need to understand their culture. You also need to understand the importance of that problem, that issue to them. Empathize. And by empathize, what I mean is, we simply say, I understand this is probably going to be very important to you. I'd imagine you want this fixed within the next couple of minutes. Right, well, this is what I can do for you. So I'm showing empathy, but I'm not showing sympathy.
And it seems like you're leading me into an answer and a solution faster, because it would give me a little bit more of a comfort that says, oh, this person's on it. They understand. My problem means something to them, because that's one of the things that I can't stand with customer service is when I call them in or call them up and I kind of feel like I'm interrupting their minesweeper game,
Right.
So that understanding that I do matter and that this problem is important and that you're going to be here to help me. It seems like that would be one of the things that would radiate from that type of conversation.
Right. And what that is empathy with compassion. And empathy with compassion. Compassion is that sort of understanding and a desire to help. So in both support roles and in project roles, we have to demonstrate compassion. We have to demonstrate a desire to help. That's what we're talking about there. We're talking about the empathy combined with compassion. We're still not talking about sympathy. Ultimately, when somebody says to me, oh, I'm sorry, my first reaction is, why did you do it? Because unless you actually caused my problem,
why are you apologizing?
Why are you
Sure,
apologizing?
that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question here. I know that you're talking about, IT needs to demonstrate compassion.
Yeah.
Talk about in project management and support roles. Now, the support role part of it, I understand, because a lot of times you're trying to quench a fire, not maybe necessarily put it out.
Firefighting,
but
yes.
Project management.
Yes.
Okay, we're setting out a project. How
Yeah.
do we start projects with compassion? What does that mean?
Well, I need to understand your priorities.
Okay.
When you come to me, quite often, when you come to me as a customer and you'll say, I need a tool that's going to do X, okay? I need a tool that's going to allow me to send and receive emails from wherever I am, right? Well, I need to understand how important that is to you.
Okay.
I need to show you compassion. If you came to me and said, I need a tool that's going to send and receive emails from wherever I am in the world, and I just said, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll get, yeah. How do you feel?
I feel slighted.
Right.
Absolutely, feel slighted.
So you feel as though really
It's not important.
It's not
I
important.
brought it to you,
Yeah.
and whatever. I hate to say that because that's the worst word in the world. I cannot stand that whatever. But
Yeah.
it's almost like the mindset that it's giving you. It's not important.
Right. And that's exactly how I don't want you to feel.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you see, I mentioned earlier about the service desk, the help desk being the window to IT. Well, customers also interact with IT in another way, and that's through project management. And again, we don't want that experience to be a negative experience. Quite often you see your customers, well, so there's a difference between a customer and a user for a start. Let me explain that. Users interact with the service desk. Customers interact with business relationship managers, project managers. Do you know what the difference is between a customer and a user?
If I remember, all right, let me try. I actually had an epiphany one day when this happened. The customer is the one that pays. The
Right.
user is the one that consumes, and they don't necessarily, are they the same person or entity?
But they can be the
They
same
can be.
person. But you're right. So the customer is the person who pays. In other words, the customer is probably the cost center manager, somebody who has influence over whether the money is spent. So the customer is dealing with the project manager. Now, you and I both know, and you know this as well, the more senior you get, the less technical you get.
Sure,
Right.
sure. Yeah, we need the 10,000-foot overview because we've got a lot more on our plates, not just one specific technicality.
Right.
Sure.
And so when you're talking about a project management role, then the project manager is talking to the customer because they're paying. So the customer is not necessarily going to be as technical. In fact, probably isn't going to be as technical as the project manager. And what that means is the customer is going to come to you with something pretty vague. Either that or they're going to come to you with something pretty specific. Because what they do is they'll tell you that they want something that's going to do X. Or they'll tell you that they want something specific because they've seen a TV commercial, or because they've seen one of the, their neighbor's kids running around with some gadget and said, oh, that's great, my team would love
Sure,
this.
or Bill comes home and says, hey, at my work, we've got XYZ, and you say, oh, I need that in my company.
Right,
Sure,
exactly. So your customer will come to you with a request for either something specific or for something very, very vague. The other thing your customer doesn't want to do is to sit down and work through all of the mechanics of the solution. What they want to do is to tell you what they want, either very vaguely or very specifically, and then walk away and leave you to figure it out in a project management role. If we don't show empathy, if we don't show compassion in that project management role, if we don't understand that priority and understand what it is that the customer is trying to say, it's a customer. Guess what they do if they don't like the service that you're going to give them?
They go to your competitor.
They go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. If a customer doesn't like the service they're getting, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to your competitor maybe. And even in, what we would traditionally have considered safe environments, like, say, government, for instance, it's not impossible now for internal customers, cost center managers, to actually go externally for solutions. So it's really important that even in our project management role, we display good customer service skills. So another skill that we've also got to display, and we talk about empathy and compassion, we're going to talk about respect now. What does respect mean to you? I know that there's a definition on the screen right now, but what does
respect,
it mean?
that means, I don't know, because how do you put the definition in the definition, that,
Right.
I don't know, I can't really define it without putting respect back into the definition, it's
a tough one,
it's an
isn't it?
understanding between two people,
Yeah.
that, I have an understanding of what your desires are, I don't know, or what your needs are, again, I'm running I wanted to put respect in it, but that's not going to define it, so help me out.
I know. And in the slide there that we saw, we talked about an admiration and a recognition for the other person's perspective and opinion.
Okay.
And it kind of, I don't like the use of the word admiration necessarily, because
Okay.
that admiration.
I don't have to admire you to respect you.
Right,
Sure,
admiration kind of suggests that you are, fawning at their feet, for instance.
Yeah,
And-
I'll give you an
and
example. I had a boss that taught me to paint, and he was an ornery, miserable old person to work for. He's one of the best bosses, and I respected him more than probably any other
Right.
boss that I'd had prior to him, just because of the way he was as a person taking care of his crew. He was a
Yeah.
hard person to work for. I didn't admire him, and I certainly didn't want to walk in his shoes, but I definitely respected him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so respect is something, it is very, very difficult to put it into words without actually using
the word respect.
Yeah. But a respect is something that you're looking for in every single interaction that you have. Now, I know that people will use, and I've seen this many, many times, and I'm sure you've come across this, that do you know who I am?
Oh, my
you have
goodness,
to respect
yes.
me just
That means
because of
your
my
ego-
position.
Your ego walked through the door before you ever got to it.
Right,
Yes,
exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
We don't want to portray that.
Right.
We want our customers to respect us, but we also want our users and our customers, we want to respect them as well. We have to respect their perspectives and their ideas and their opinions too.
Joe, do you believe that respect comes with, a small dash, if you will, of humility?
Yes.
I mean, almost
Yeah.
like they have to shake hands together, because
There should be a mutual understanding between, service desk analysts and the user that nobody's better than anybody else.
Sure.
And this is something that I hold true to absolutely every single service desk analyst. And every time I've walked into the room of a call center, I have said to them, we all are unique in our own ways.
Sure.
We all have different skills. I could not do your job, but you could not do mine. And I don't expect you to respect me because of who I am, but I expect you to respect me in the same way that I respect you, because I couldn't do your job. I don't have your skills. And that applies right the way across the board.
Does.
From a service desk analyst to a user, you couldn't do their job.
Yeah, you think about it, it's one of the reasons we have tiered help desk to begin with, right?
Right.
We escalate it to people that I don't have, I'll give you an example. I look at hardware. I don't look at complex routing topologies. When I need to figure out something about a routing topology, I'm going to take to the people that work with Cisco every day because they understand that.
Right. Now, I don't like what you just did.
What's that?
Because you said...
Transference?
No. You said we escalate it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just did was inferring that
That there's a
escalation
that
is
somebody's
a higher
sitting
level.
above me.
Right. And it's not. We
Okay.
call it functional escalation. And functional escalation
Okay.
is actually just passing it to another team with a different set of skills.
So it brings back to that same level
We
of
are
respect.
all on the same level.
Interesting,
Right.
interesting.
We just have different skills. Right at the very beginning of our series, we talked about the fact that technical people aren't very good at talking to customers sometimes.
Oh, not at all, yeah.
Right. They've got a different set of skills.
Sure.
So they need to respect the service desk analyst who have a set of customer service skills just as much as the service desk analysts need to respect the technical skills of the second and third level support. So we're not escalating up, we're escalating across.
Okay, so it's horizontal. It's
Yes.
not a vertical
Yes.
escalation.
Yeah,
Interesting.
very much so.
Okay.
We call it functional escalation. Escalating up is escalating to a senior level of management. That's a hierarchical escalation.
Okay.
But a functional escalation is a pass to another support team. And that's why I say I don't like what
It's
you
interesting.
did.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because then what you're saying there is you're putting the service desk on the bottom of that pile. The service desk isn't on the bottom of a pile at all.
Oh, sure.
The service desk is on an equal level to everybody else.
Most definitely, especially the fact that they're on the front lines of our
Right, when
service.
it comes to IT support, and I will go to second level teams and I will say to them, do you want to go and talk to a user? Do you want to do their work? Because, you know, the service desk do an absolutely fantastic job. They actually, not only are they the window to IT, but they also provide that translation, and they also are the people that, well, without them, just think about the mess that the second level support team would be in without the service desk.
That would be a nightmare.
Right.
That would
So
be a
we're
nightmare.
not actually talking about somebody down here with everyone else up here. We're actually talking about, you know, if anything, I would put the service desk sort of, you know, right on a pedestal, to
Yeah,
be
most
perfectly
definitely.
honest. Because without them, it would be very, very difficult in an IT role. Now, I know when we talk about a service desk, we also refer to the tools that they use as well. And it's not just about the people, but here we're talking about customer service skills, and that is about the people. It's about how people interact. So in order to demonstrate respect when you are on the phone or even in an email as well, or even in a chat, we've got certain little recommendations there, such as, you know, look for ways to understand, you know, ask probing questions. Don't make excuses. Oh boy, do I hate that. I don't know about you, but I absolutely hate that. I couldn't do that because, or I can't do this because, or this isn't possible because. Don't tell me what isn't possible. Tell me what is possible. Tell me what you can do. If you can tell me what you can do for me, then I am more likely to respect that you can't do something. Service desk analysts that start off by making excuses are service desk analysts that generally don't get respect from the users. Because if you say, well, I can't do this and I can't do this and I can't do this because I don't have the access, or because I don't have the authority, or because, you know, I can't, you know, it's not within my wheelhouse. I've heard that one before, whatever that means, you know. Or because, oh, there's another team that have to do that for me. That's just excuses. Always try and keep the conversation positive. So tell the person at the other end of the phone or the other end of the email what you can do and not what you can't do. And again, be willing to see their perspective. when we talk about skills, we talk about sort of when we've talked about this right at the very sort of beginning of our series. We talked about technical people not necessarily having great interpersonal skills or not necessarily being able to communicate. And then we talk about our service desk as having great interpersonal skills. Well, the service desk sits right in the middle because, as I've said before, you know, they are the translation service for our technical people,
Kind
for
of
our
like the,
second and third level.
the liaison, if you will, between our customers and our IT staff.
That's exactly what they are.
Sure.
And there's a reason why we have service desk analysts. Now, I know that there are a lot of service desk analysts that would actually prefer to, not service desk analysts, sorry, customers that would actually prefer to talk to, you know, the second level person or a third level person. Do you know why that is?
Because maybe they think they know better?
No.
Okay,
Well,
that would be my
they do.
first thought.
Well, yeah, because they perceive that they're actually going to be able to help them quicker,
Gotcha.
generally.
Sure.
But it actually has a detrimental effect on the work of that particular analyst. And 9 times out of 10, the service desk have been given the tools to be able to resolve the issue anyway. Plus, of course, we have the added benefit with the service desk of being able to log the calls, being able to manage the calls and ensure that somebody else is dealing with those calls if they're not. So in terms of the service desk, we recruit for the interpersonal skills because the technical skills can be learned. Now, I know we've already discussed about the fact that, you know, some interpersonal skills can be cultured, yes, most definitely, and they can be sort of, you know, encouraged. But technical skills can definitely be learned. As long as somebody has a technical bias, we can teach technical skills a lot easier than we can teach interpersonal skills. So from a service desk perspective, we actually recruit for interpersonal skills because it is difficult to teach things like tolerance. How do you teach tolerance?
I think that's something you either have or you don't have.
Right.
Same thing with the other ones that are on the list, too.
Yeah, the other ones that are on the list, such as patience
Yes,
and
absolutely.
empathy, and what you know what we've
And
talked
I just
about.
say that because I'm a parent, and I have not been the one to have the greatest patience over the years, and
Yeah.
it's been my kids that have given me the experience to start learning better patience. And that's not to say that every customer service analyst is going to have kids, and we don't say, well, you need to have kids in order to become a service desk analyst. But that's something in my lifetime through experience that has helped me. But I don't think it was anything I ever obtained from any technical skills or any teaching that came out of a book.
Yeah, yeah. It is something that has to be nurtured, and you know it. And I say that it's not necessarily difficult. It's not necessarily impossible. But how do you teach tolerance? If somebody has, you know, a very impatient personality, it's very, very difficult to teach skills like tolerance. So this is why we recruit for those relevant interpersonal skills on a service desk. It's easier, much easier for us to train technical skills than what it is for us to teach the interpersonal skills. You know, hence the reason why we have series like this, for instance, here at IT Pro TV. And this is really just to open your minds to the fact that it's not just about the technical skills. Sure, we're going to talk about the technical skills in a little while and the top 10 common problems that we have. But ultimately, if you cannot talk to the user on the other end of the phone, then it doesn't matter how good you are technically. The user will still not have any faith or any respect or any trust in your abilities. And that's the important thing. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little break because we have nowhere near finished with our communication skills. So we are going to come back, and we're going to come back in a part 2, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Sounds good. We got more to communicate. We just don't have enough minutes minutes on the clock, so we'll do exactly that. Joe, thank you so much for being here in the studios with us. And remember, we appreciate you, the viewer watching. Signing out for IT Pro TV, I'm Wes Bryan.
And I'm Joe Pico.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.